I have buried a wife, 3 good horses, and 1 friend I loved more than any of them. I have counted every winter I own the way a poor man counts coins, slow, twice, hopping the number changed. And I will tell you plainly, I was done. I had made my peace with dying alone on this mountain, and I was not unhappy about it. Then a storm handed me a woman with frost in her hair and 4 words in her mouth. I have nothing left. I don't know why I said what I said back. It wasn't kindness. I'm not a kind man, ask anyone who's still living. But some things come up out of you before your good sense can stop them, and once they're said out loud in the cold, they belong to you. Stay with me. This is the story of the worst winter of my life, and the only one I'd live again. The wind that night didn't howl. People always say the wind howls, and it makes me think they've never stood out in real weather. Real weather doesn't announce itself. It works quiet. It presses on your ears like water, and it takes your voice and hands it back to you 3 feet farther off than where your mouth is, so you can't even be sure you spoke. I was out in it because of a heifer. That's the whole poetry of my life, if you want it in one line. A man who'd made his peace with the end of the world, dragged back into the middle of it by a stupid animal who couldn't count her own legs to 4 and stay by the barn. I'd gone out at dusk to close the lower gate and found it open and her gone, and I stood there a long minute doing the arithmetic every rancher does. 1 heifer, 40 below by midnight, a mountain the size of God. I should have let her die. I want that understood. A wiser man, a colder man, and I have been called both, lets the heifer go and drinks his coffee by the fire and writes it down in the morning as loss, which is a word I know how to spell in my sleep. Instead, I took the lantern. I keep a book. I should say that now because it matters to how I'm telling this, and because it's the only thing about me my late wife left instructions on. Scene, that was her name, and it's the last time I'll say it plain because saying it costs me and I'm not made of money. She kept accounts for the both of us. Whether births, deaths, the price of nails, which neighbor owed which favor. When she got sick, she made me promise I'd keep it up. 1 line every night, Amos. Whether anything happened or not. Especially if nothing happened. She said a man who stops writing down his days stops believing he has any. So I have a stub of pencil worn to the length of my thumb, and every night for 11 years I have written 1 line. Most of them are nothing. Cold, wind from the north. Nothing happened. I've written nothing happened more times than I've said any prayer. Some nights it's the truest thing I own. The line I wrote that night, later, once I could hold the pencil, was 3 words. I'll get to it. I found the heifer's tracks past the deadfall where the trail bends, and I found something I wasn't looking for, which is the way the important things in a life mostly arrive. There was a shape against the fallen timber. Low. Wrong. Snow builds up soft and even on everything given time, and this shape had edges the snow hadn't finished with yet, which meant it was new, which meant it was moving not long ago. I thought at first, dear. Then I thought, and I am ashamed of the thought, good meat. 11 years alone will teach you to be honest about the shabby little rooms inside you. Then the shape lifted its head. It was a woman. She was down on her side in the lee of the deadfall with her knees pulled up, and she had gotten herself into the one halfway smart position a body can get into out there, small, tucked, out of the direct wind, which told me 2 things at once. She wasn't a fool, and she'd been out long enough to run out of better ideas. I've read that when you're freezing near the end, you feel warm. You start to shed your coat because your poor scrambled body thinks the fire's already come. She hadn't gotten there. She was still shivering, which sounds like the worst sign but is the better one. The shiver is the body still fighting, still spending fuel, still on your side. When the shivering stops is when you should be scared. She looked at me and my lantern, and she did not look afraid, and I have thought about that a great deal since. A woman alone in the dark, a big man coming out of the storm with a light and a rifle on his back, and she looked at me the way you'd look at weather. Like I was one more thing happening to her that she had no strength left to have an opinion about. I got down on my knees in the snow. My knees are bad and they told me about it. I put the lantern where the light fell on both of us, because I have found people are less frightened by a face than by a shape behind a light. "Can you walk?" I asked her. Her lips moved. Nothing came. She tried again and got out something that wasn't quite a word, and I understood then how far gone she was, because the cold takes your speech last of your voluntary things. You'll lose your fingers and your feet to it before your tongue. "Don't talk," I said. "Save it, I'm going to get you up." I want to tell you I lifted her clean and carried her like they do in the tellings. The truth is she was dead weight and stiff, and I am 59 years old with a bad back and worse knees. And I got her half up and we both went down. And I said a word Scene wouldn't have liked, and I got her up again. She tried to help. That's the thing I noticed, even mostly gone. Some animal part of her was trying to get her own legs under her, trying to take some of her own weight so I wouldn't have to. Even then, even at the bottom of everything, she was trying not to be a burden. I have known men who wouldn't do that much sober and warm. It's 1.25 miles to my cabin from that deadfall. I have walked it 10,000 times. That night it was the far side of the moon. I got her arm over my shoulders and my arm around her, and we went one bad step at a time, and the wind pushed us and I pushed back, and somewhere in there I stopped feeling my own feet, and I decided that was a problem for later. The heifer, I never did find that night. She turned up 2 days after in the Box Canyon, alive, dumb as a stump, and I have never once told her what she cost me and what she bought me both. I got the door open with my shoulder. I got the woman inside. I got the door shut against the mountain, and the sudden absence of the wind was like going deaf. She went down in a heap by the stove, and I stood there a second breathing like a bellows. And then the years took over, because whatever else I am, I have kept things alive in winter my whole life, and cold is cold whether it's got a heart in it or not. I built the fire up. I got the wet off her coat, which was a man's coat and too big and worn through at the elbows, and her boots, which were the wrong boots, town boots, no business on a mountain. I wrapped her in every dry thing I owned. I heated water and didn't scald her with it, made it just past cool, because you don't want to shock a frozen body with heat. You want to bring it back slow, the way you'd thaw a pipe. I put the mug in her 2 hands and folded her fingers around it and held them there because she couldn't yet. And all the while I was doing the practical things my hands knew, some other part of me was standing off to the side, appalled, because I had not had another living soul under my roof since I dug a hole in the frozen ground 11 years back and put the best of myself into it. I had gotten very good at being alone. I had built a whole life out of it, the way a snail builds a shell, small, hard, exactly the size of me and no room for anyone else. And here was a stranger dripping meltwater on my floor, breathing my air, being real in my house. I was angry, I'll own it. I was angry at her for existing and at the heifer for the open gate and at myself most of all, for taking the lantern, for being the kind of fool who takes the lantern. An hour, maybe more, the fire ticking, the wind working the walls, her shivering slowing down, the good kind of slowing, the warming kind. I checked, I made sure. Color coming back into her face, which under the frost and the wind burn was a young face. Younger than I'd guessed out there. Not a girl, but not far past being one. Late 20s I put her, and I've a good eye for age from 30 years of guessing it on livestock, which is not a comparison she'd have thanked me for. Then she spoke. She'd gotten her voice back with the warmth, and it came out low and cracked and flat, no self-pity in it, which is what made it terrible. Self-pity you can argue with. This was just a fact she was reporting. "I have nothing left," she said. She wasn't talking to me. I understood that. She was saying it to the room, to the fire. To the God she'd apparently given up expecting anything from. She'd been saying it in her head for a long time, I think days, weeks, and it had finally worked its way out of her mouth the way a splinter works out of a hand. "I have nothing left. And I want you to understand I knew that country, not the words of it but the shape. I had stood in this same cabin the winter after I dug the hole and thought that exact thought in that exact flat voice. No drama in it, just the arithmetic. There is nothing left. The number is 0, twice counted. I had eaten it and slept in it and worn it like a coat for 11 years. So when I answered her, I wasn't being kind. I need that to be clear. Kindness would have been softer and slower, and it would have had a plan behind it. What came out of me came out fast, before my good sense could get its boots on, and it surprised me more than it surprised her. "You do now," I said. She turned and looked at me, and I looked back, and I hadn't the faintest idea in the world what I'd meant by it. Her name was Della. It took her 3 days to give it to me, and I didn't push, because a name is a thing a person hands you when they've decided you're safe to be handed things, and you can't hurry that any more than you can hurry a thaw. In the meantime, I called her nothing at all, and she called me nothing, and we moved around each other in that one-room cabin like two cats deciding whether to fight. I gave her the bed. I took the floor by the stove, and my back informed me nightly of its opinion on the matter, and I ignored it, because a man who's slept on the ground driving cattle can sleep anywhere, and because there are some things you do without deciding to, and giving a half-froze woman your bed is one of them if you're going to keep calling yourself a man at all. That first full day she mostly slept, and I mostly watched the storm and pretended I wasn't watching her, and I did the thing I do, which is I counted. I counted the split logs in the wood box, enough for 9 days if the cold held, 6 if it deepened. I counted the jars on the shelf. I counted, without meaning to, how many years it had been since anyone but me had made a sound in that room, and the number was too big to sit easy, so I stopped counting that one. She woke in the afternoon and caught me at the stove, and she watched me a while, and then she said, "You're waiting for me to say what happened." "No," I said, and it was true. "I've got no use for what happened. What happens over. It's the next part I'd want to know, and you don't owe me that either." Something moved in her face at that. Not gratitude. I don't think she had gratitude to spare, and I wouldn't have wanted it. Something more like a person setting down one heavy thing after carrying it a long way, testing whether the ground would hold it. "There isn't a next part," she said. "That's what I was trying to tell you last night. There's no next part. There's just nothing after." I stirred the pot. I'm not a talker. Scene used to say getting a sentence out of me was like getting the last bit of molasses out of the jar in January. You had to warm it and wait, and even then it came slow. But there are some things I know, and I know them all the way down, and this was one. "I thought that too," I said. "Once, for about the length of a winter, I thought exactly that. That there was a before, and then there was nothing, and I was living in the nothing, and that was all the living I had coming." I set the spoon down. "I was wrong. Not because things got better. I want to be honest with you, they mostly didn't. I was wrong because nothing turned out to have days in it. It turned out to have wood to split and animals to feed and a book to keep, and none of it meant anything, and I did it anyway, and doing it anyway turned out to be the next part. That's all the next part is sometimes. It's just anyway." She didn't answer, but she ate the whole bowl, which she hadn't done at breakfast, and I counted that. A man learns to measure things by whatever scale he's got, and I've never had much of a scale for feelings, so I measured her in bowls. The storm broke on the 3rd day, and on the 3rd day 2 things happened. The first is she told me her name. She said it plain in the morning, the way you'd hand someone a tool. "Here, you'll need this." "Della," she said. "My name's Della," I should have said. And I said Amos, and that was the whole ceremony of it, and it was enough. The second thing was Dawa came up the mountain. I should tell you about Dawa, because you can't understand what came after without him, and because he's owed better than to be a name that shows up when it's useful. Dawa is Apache. His people are of the high country, the same country I've spent my life failing to deserve, and they were reading this mountain like a book before my grandfather's grandfather knew it existed. I won't pretend to more understanding of his people than I've earned, which is not much. A man can live his whole life alongside something and only ever see the edge of it, and I've been honest enough to know that's all I've got. The edge. But the edge of Dawa was the best thing I knew. We'd found each other 20 years back over a dispute about water that could have gone bloody and didn't. mostly because he was the more patient man and I was the more tired one. He taught me 100 things about this country I'd have died not knowing. How to read the snow for what it was hiding, where the wind lies and where it tells the truth, which plants would keep a man alive and which would just make him wish he was dead faster. When Scene was dying, he came up and sat with me, and he didn't say a word the whole 3 days, and it was the only company I could have stood. He knew a thing about losing people. He'd lost more of his than I'll ever have to lose of mine and lost them harder, and I never once heard him make it a smaller thing than it was or a bigger one either. He just carried it. Some men carry it like Dawa does, straight-backed, no noise. It's the only way I've ever seen that looked like dignity instead of just endurance, though I've come to think maybe those are closer to the same thing than I used to. He came up the mountain on the third morning because that's what he does after a bad storm. He comes to see is the old fool still breathing, and he never says that's why, and I never say thank you, and that's the shape of the thing between us and it suits us both. He came in the door and saw Della and stopped. Not surprised, I've never once seen Dawa surprised. Just reading. His eyes went over her the way they go over a track in the snow, taking in more in 2 seconds than I'd taken in 3 days. The man's coat. The town boots by the door, ruined now. The way she'd gone still and careful the instant a second stranger filled the doorway, gone still the way something does when it's been hunted. He looked at her a long moment. Then he looked at me, and something passed over his face that I didn't like, because Dawa's face doesn't move for small things. He crossed the room slow, the way you move around a spooked horse, and he crouched by the stove near her, not too near, and he said something low. I didn't catch it. And Della, who had barely put 6 sentences together for me in 3 days, went white to the lips and answered him back in a rush, 3 or 4 words, and her hands came up over her mouth. Dawa, I said, what is it? He stood. He looked at me, and he said the thing that turned that winter from a rescue into something with teeth. The men who were hunting her, he said, did not stop hunting when the storm did. I cut sign on the low trail this morning. 3 horses, shod. He paused. They are a day behind her, maybe less, and they are coming up. I looked at Della. She had her back against my bed frame and her knees pulled up, the exact shape I'd found her in against the deadfall, small, tucked, out of the wind of the world. And she looked at me with those weather-flat eyes, only they weren't flat anymore. There was something in them now, and I realized after a second that it was the worst thing I'd seen yet. It was apology. She was sorry. She was about to bring 3 armed men up my mountain to my door, and the thing in her face wasn't fear for herself. It was shame that she'd cost me the lantern. There is a kind of quiet that comes when you know a fight is coming and you don't yet know its shape. It isn't peaceful. It's the loudest quiet there is. Every small sound in it stands up and announces itself, the fire settling, the wind changing its mind against the north wall, the tin cup Dawa set down going tick on the table. I have lived most of my life inside quiet, and I thought I knew all its varieties. I didn't know that one. That one was new. Dawa laid it out flat, the way he lays everything out, no more weight on it than it earned. 3 riders, shod horses. Which meant not his people and not mine, town horses, hired or owned by men with money enough to shoe them and reason enough to ride them into whether no sane man rides into. A day back. Maybe less if they'd push through the tail of the storm, and men who'd push a woman into a storm would push a horse into one too. They'll lose the trail where the deadfall is, I said. Snow filled it in. There's nothing to follow past there. There is you, Dawa said. Your tracks, yours are fresh over hers. A child could read them. He looked at me, not unkind. You did not carry her the way a man walks. You carried her the way a man carries weight. It shows in the step. They will read it the same as I did. So I had done it. Not the heifer, not the open gate me. I'd gone out with a lantern and walked a straight, bright line from a half-dead stranger to my own front door, and any fool with eyes could follow it home. I sat down, my knees again, and something else this time, something lower than the knees. I looked at Della. You're going to tell me now, I said. Not what happened. I meant that before. But I need to know what's riding up my mountain, and I need to know it from you and not from three men with rifles. So, who are they? She was a long time answering. Long enough that Dawa, who has more patience in one hand than I have in my whole body, got up and went to the window to watch the trail, giving her the only privacy the room had, which was the privacy of a broad back turned. One of them's my husband, she said. I have thought a great deal since about how a person tells the worst thing about their life. Some tell it big, with weeping, and you can't get near the truth of it for all the noise. Some tell it small, like Della did, so small and level you have to lean in, and by the time you've understood what you've heard you can't ununderstand it, and you'd give anything to. She'd married him at 19. He had land down in the valley, cattle, standing, the kind of man a girl's people are relieved to see her taken by, because it means she's provided for and off the ledger of their own worries. Her people had worries enough. She didn't say what kind. She didn't have to. There's a way a person says my people had worries that closes the door on the room behind it, and I've said things that way myself and I know not to try the handle. The first year he only frightened her. She said that like it was the good year. The first year he only frightened me. She said it the way I'd say the winter the creek didn't freeze, a thing that had been hard but survivable, a thing you could almost be nostalgic for once you saw what came after. I'm not going to lay out what came after. She laid it out for me, in that small level voice, with her hands wrapped around a cup she wasn't drinking from, and I listened to all of it because she decided to hand it to me, and the least a man can do when he's handed a thing like that is take the whole of it and not flinch where she can see him flinch. But I'll not set it all down here. Some of it isn't mine to spend, and some of it I've spent enough nights trying to unhear that I won't put it into the world again. Scene kept a book so a man could believe he had his days. Some days you keep out of the book on purpose. Some days the mercy is the pencil that never touches them. I'll say this much. She'd run 3 times. The first 2 times he'd found her and brought her back and made sure she understood the arithmetic of running, what it cost, and who else it cost, because a man like that never lets the price land only on you. He's too smart for that. He finds the person you love and lays the bill there. The third time, this time, she'd run in the wrong season, with the wrong boots and the wrong coat, straight up into a mountain in a storm. And I finally understood the thing that had chilled me worst about finding her. She hadn't run up the mountain to escape. She'd run up the mountain to die where he couldn't make it mean anything, where there'd be no body to punish, no lesson to teach, no one else to bill. She'd meant to walk up into the white until the white took her, quiet, clean, hers, the one thing in her whole life that would be hers, the ending of it. I have nothing left hadn't been despair talking to the room. It had been a woman taking careful, final inventory, twice counted, and finding the number true, and being almost, I have to say it, because she said it, being almost at peace with it. And a fool with a lantern had walked out of the storm and ruined even that. You should have let me be, she said, not angry. That was the worst of it, not one grain of anger in it. Out there, you should have walked past. It would have been over by morning and it would have been mine, and now she stopped. Her hand tightened on the cup. Now it's yours too, and his, and your friends, everyone's but mine again. I have been called a hard man. I have earned it. But I sat there, and I felt something come up in me that I hadn't felt in 11 years. Hadn't let myself feel because feeling it was a door I'd nailed shut on purpose. And it wasn't pity, pity's cheap, and she'd have smelled it and hated me for it rightly. It was recognition. It was one animal that had been to the bottom looking at another animal at the bottom and knowing the exact temperature of the water down there. When my wife died, I said, and Dawa's back went still at the window because I'd never said this to him in 20 years, never said it to a living soul. I sat in that chair you're near and I had her rifle across my knees and I did the arithmetic same as you, twice counted, came out the same both times. I heard Della go still. And it wasn't a storm that stopped me. It wasn't hope either, and it wasn't God, And it wasn't the thought of her looking down disappointed, because I don't believe she's looking down. I believe she's just gone, and that's the whole of it, and I've made my peace with that too. I turned the pencil stub over in my fingers, the worn-down nub of it. It was that I'd promised her a line. Every night. One line in the book. And I sat there and I could not for the life of me figure out how to write the line for that night. What do you put? Nothing happened. Everything happened. Amos died. I wasn't dead yet. I'd have to do it first, and then I couldn't very well write it, could I? A sound came out of me that wasn't a laugh. I sat there 4 hours trying to write one sentence I couldn't write, and by the time the sun came up I was too tired to die. That's all. That's the whole reason I'm here. Not courage. Not hope. A book I didn't know how to fill out. Della looked at me. And for the first time since I'd hauled her out of the snow, something in her face wasn't at the bottom of the water. It was still down there, but it had looked up. "That's a stupid reason to live," she said. "Yes," I said. "It's the only kind there is. The good reasons are all too big to hold. It's the stupid small ones that keep a man breathing. A book, a heifer, a promise you don't even understand anymore. You don't need a reason worth living for, Della. God help you if you wait for one of those. You just need one too stupid to die on." She was quiet a long time. Then she said very low, "I don't have a book." "No," I said, "but you've got the next hour, and after that you'll have the one after it. And that's the whole of it, that's the whole trick. There isn't any more to it than that, and anybody tells you different is selling something." I stood up, and my knees said their piece, and I let them. "Now, there's 3 men coming up my mountain, and I find I've got an opinion about that I didn't have an hour ago. Here's the decision. I want to set it down honest, because the whole rest of it turns on it, and because I've turned it over 1,000 nights and I still don't know if I chose right, only that I chose." Dawa laid out the sane path first, because he's the sane one. We had time, half a day, maybe more. We could take Della down the back of the mountain by the box canyon while the storms leaving still hid a trail, get her to his people, who had hidden people from other people before and knew how it was done. 3 riders coming up would find an empty cabin and a cold trail and a hard old man who knew nothing about any woman, and they'd have no cause to do worse than curse and turn around. Nobody bleeds. Everybody lives. It was the right plan. Dawa doesn't offer wrong plans. And Della said no. She said it quiet, and she said it certain, and it took the wind out of both of us. If I run again, he follows again. That's the whole of my life, that sentence. I run, he follows, and he makes someone else pay for the running. She looked at Dawa. "Your people. You'd hide me, and he'd come, and it'd be your people standing between him and me, and I've watched what happens to the people who stand between him and me." She shook her head, one hard shake. "No, I'm done running up mountains to die, and I'm done running down them to live. I'm done running. It ends here or it doesn't end, and I'd rather it ended." And I stood there in my own cabin and understood that the half-dead woman I'd found in the snow, who'd had nothing left, who'd meant to let the white take her, that same woman had just found the one thing at the very bottom of the barrel that a person can find down there, the last thing, the thing that's under even hope because it doesn't need hope to stand. She'd found that she was done being made to pay. There's a kind of courage that's just anger that's finally organized itself. She'd been afraid so long the fear had worn all the way through, and what was under it was this. And I looked at Dawa, and Dawa looked at me, and I watched the sane plan die in his eyes, not because he agreed with her. He thought it was madness. He told me so later, plain, but because he understood something I was slower to understand. It wasn't ours to decide. We'd both spent our lives having things decided for us and around us and over us. The water, the land, the winters, the losses. And here was a person who'd had every single thing decided for her, her whole life, right down to the ending she'd tried to steal back in the snow. If we took that from her too, even to save her, even out of love, we'd just be 3 more men deciding what happened to Della. "All right," I said, and I heard my own voice come out steady in a way I didn't feel. "Then it ends here." Dawa closed his eyes for a second. Then he opened them and went to check the loads in my rifle, because whatever he thought of the plan, he wasn't going to let his friend meet 3 armed men with a fouled weapon. That's the kind of man he is. He'll tell you you're a fool, and then he'll clean your rifle so you're a living fool a little longer. We had until nightfall, and maybe not that. I did the thing I do. I counted. 3 riders, 3 horses that we knew. Rifles, surely, pistols, likely. Against us, 1 old man with bad knees and a good eye. 1 Apache who could shoot the eye out of a jackrabbit at 100 yards and move over open snow like he was a rumor. And 1 woman who a day ago had wanted to die and now, God help us all, wanted to stand. I counted the cartridges in the box. I counted the split logs out of habit and caught myself, and understood that some part of me had already decided the wood didn't matter anymore, because we'd either needed a long time or no time at all. Della watched me count. "What are you doing?" she said. "Counting," I said. "It's what I do instead of praying. Same thing near enough. You put the numbers in a row and you look at them and you decide whether they're numbers you can live with." I set the cartridge box down. "These aren't good numbers, Della. I'll not lie to you, you've had enough men lie to you. 3 of them, 3 of us, and 1 of us has never held a rifle, I'd guess." "No," she admitted. "Then you'll load and you'll keep your head down and you'll do the thing I tell you when I tell you." I looked at her. "It's bad numbers, but I've lived a while on bad numbers, and I'll tell you what my wife knew that I'm only just now remembering." I picked up the pencil stub. My hands weren't shaking, which surprised me. The book doesn't ask you were you brave. It doesn't ask did you win. It asks one thing only, every night, same question. I held it up, the worn nub of it, the last inch of 11 years. Did you keep it? Did you write the line? That's all it asks, whether anything happened or not. Outside, faint, far down the mountain where the trail comes up through the black timber, a horse blew. We all heard it. Della's hand found the edge of the table and gripped it, and her knuckles went white, and she did not run. And I have kept many things in my book, and I have never been prouder to write a line than the one I wrote about that. That she heard the horse and she stayed. That the woman who had nothing left, who'd counted herself down to 0 and found it true, heard 3 armed men come up her mountain in the last of the light and stood, and did not run. I nodded at Dawa. He went out the back low and fast and was gone into the blue dark like he'd never been, to be the thing they wouldn't count, the number they didn't know to add. I put out the lantern, and we waited in the dark for the men who were coming, and I found that the loudest quiet there is had gotten louder still, and somewhere under it, small and stupid and impossible to kill, was the thing I'd said to her in the snow 3 nights back before my good sense could stop it. "You do now." I still didn't rightly know what I'd meant by it. But I was about to find out, and so was she. And so were the 3 men riding up out of the black timber with the whole weight of her old life behind them, and no earthly idea what was waiting at the top. They came up out of the timber the way men come who have never once in their lives had to be careful. Loud, sure, riding 3 abreast where the trail was wide enough and single where it wasn't, and calling out to each other in the careless way of men who own the ground they're standing on and everything on it. I heard them before I saw them, which is the whole story of men like that. You always hear them first. They announce themselves the way the wind never does. I was in the dark of the cabin with the shutters cracked an inch. Della was behind the wood stove where I'd put her low, with the cartridge box in her lap and instructions to load and pass and keep her head down, and above all, to stay behind the iron of that stove, because a stove will stop a bullet and a wall won't. Dawa was out there somewhere in the blue-black, a number they hadn't counted, and I could no more have told you where than I could tell you where the wind sleeps. The 3 of them stopped in the clearing a good throw from the door. Snow to the horses' knees, the last light going purple behind the peaks, their breath and the horse's breath all smoking up together. And the middle one, the biggest, sat his horse and looked at my cabin and my smoking chimney and the light I'd killed too late, and he smiled. I couldn't see the smile at that distance in that light. I didn't need to. You can hear a smile in a man's voice when he's the kind that smiles at this. "Della," he called, friendly, God, the friendliness of it. "Della, honey, you in there? And here is the thing I will carry to my own hole in the ground." She didn't make a sound. Behind the stove, in the dark, the woman who 3 nights back had wanted the white to take her, whose whole married life had been that one voice calling her name in exactly that tone. She heard it, and her breath caught once. One small hitch I felt more than heard, and then she took hold of herself and she went quiet and hard as the iron she was crouched behind. She didn't answer. She didn't run. She reached over in the dark and put one cartridge into my hand ready, so I wouldn't have to look for it. I have known that woman's whole life for the length of a bad winter, and I would have put my own into the snow for her by then, and I want that understood before I tell the rest. She's not here, I called back through the crack in the shutter. Old man's voice, tired, put upon. And whoever you are, you're on my land with guns out, and I'd thank you to turn around. A pause. Then the big man laughed, and the two beside him laughed because he did, and he swung down off his horse into the snow like he had all the time God ever made. "Old-timer," he said, walking his horse forward a few steps easy, "I followed a set of tracks up this mountain that say different. 2 sets going in your door. One of 'em hers. I know her step. I know it better than she does." He stopped. "Now I'm a reasonable man. Send her out and I'll believe you didn't know whose wife you took in, and you can go on being an old fool alone up here till you freeze. No hard feelings." "Keep her," and the friendliness went out of his voice all at once, like a lamp blown out, and what was under it was the thing Della had run 3 times from. "And I'll burn you out and take her anyway, and leave you in the ashes to think about your manners." Behind the stove, Della's hand found my sleeve. Not to stop me. I understood that later. Just to be touching another living person when that voice said those words in the dark, the way you'd touch a wall in a black room to know which way was up. I have thought hard about what a braver man says here. Something ringing. Something for the tellings. What I actually said was the truest thing I had, and it came out quiet, and I don't think he even heard all of it. "She's got nothing left for you to take," I said. "You already took it. She's got something else now, and you're not getting that." Then a lot of things happened close together. And I'll tell them slow because they went fast, and the going fast is how men get things wrong in the telling. The big man's hand moved for his hip. The 2 still mounted moved for their rifles, and out of the blue-black off to their left, from a stand of timber they'd ridden right past and never counted, Dawa's voice came, not loud. Dawa is never loud, just carrying, flat and certain across the snow. "There are more of us than there are of you." 1 sentence. That's all he gave them. He didn't fire. He didn't show himself. He put one true sentence into the dark from a direction they hadn't accounted for, and I watched 3 men who'd been sure of their arithmetic their whole lives suddenly find a number they couldn't see. The 2 mounted men wheeled their horses, rifles swinging, trying to find him, finding nothing, finding dark and timber and their own breath. Because that's the thing about a man who moves like Dawa, he's never where the sound was. The sound is a gift he leaves behind him on his way to somewhere else. "Who's out there?" the big man said, and it was the first time his voice wasn't sure. "How many?" And Dawa didn't answer, which was worse than any number, because a man will believe the dark holds more than the dark can say. I'll not pretend it was a battle. It wasn't. The tellings want a battle and I won't give them one, because the truth is better and the truth is this. It was arithmetic. 3 careless men had ridden up a mountain sure of their sum, and the mountain had added a number they couldn't count, an old man behind iron shutters with a rested rifle and a good eye, a woman who would not this time run, and a ghost in the timber who could put a bullet through any one of them from a place they'd never find in time. They did the sum the way I do it, slow, twice, and they didn't like the answer. The big man stood in the snow a long moment, and I watched him hunt for a way to make the numbers come out the way they always had and not find one. His men were spooked. His horse was spooked. The dark had a voice in it and no body to shoot. And somewhere in there I saw it. I was watching his face in the last purple light and I saw the exact moment. He understood that he might die on this mountain over a woman he could not, in the end, actually keep. That was the thing his kind never counts on. That the day comes when the bill lands on them, and it's higher than they're willing to pay. "This isn't finished," he said. No, I agreed. Probably it isn't, but it's finished tonight. And tonight's the only night you've got a vote in. He looked at the cabin a long time. Then he swung back up onto his horse, and he called something to his men, and the three of them turned their horses down the black trail they'd come up, and the careless left them all the way down. I could hear it. They went down quiet and careful and small, the way men go when they've learned just once, and too late to enjoy the lesson, that they were never as big as the mountain. We didn't move for a long time after the last of them was gone. You don't. You wait in case it's a trick, in case the dark holds one more number. Dawa came in an hour later through the back, silent, and set my rifle he'd been covering us with down by the door, and looked at the both of us, and said the only thing he said about the whole night. He will send others or come himself in the spring with more. He looked at Della. You know this. I know it, Della said. Then you have until spring, Dawa said, to become someone he cannot take. It can be done. I have seen it done. And that was all. That was Dawa's whole blessing on the thing, and from him it was a speech. She stayed. Not because it was safe. Dawa was right, and we all three knew he was right. And there were nights that whole long winter I lay by the stove and listened to the wind and did the arithmetic of spring and didn't like the sum. She stayed because the alternative was to run, and she was done running, and a person who's truly done running has to be somewhere, and this was the somewhere she chose. The winter went the way winters go, long. We split the wood, both of us now, and she got strong at it in a way that surprised her more than me. I'd watched half-dead things come back before and knew what a body could do given cause. She learned the mountain some. Not the way Dawa knows it, not the way I know it, but her own way, which was different from both of ours, and I came to think, no worse. She'd point out things I'd stopped seeing 30 years back. The way the light comes off new snow. A fox's track crossing the yard. Small things. Free things. The kind a person notices again only after they've been all the way down to where there's nothing and come back up, and found the small free things waiting like they'd never doubted you. And I kept the book. Of course I kept the book. I want to end on the book, because Scene made me promise on the book, and because it's the truest thing I own, and because one night late that winter Della asked me what I'd written the night I found her, the night in the snow, the night of the 4 words, and my answer I didn't understand. I got it down off the shelf. I found the page, and I turned it around so she could read it herself, because some things a man can't say out loud even after a whole hard winter, but he can let you read them, which is near enough. 3 words, in pencil worn to the length of a thumb. Found her anyway. She read it a long time, longer than 3 words takes, and when she looked up there was something in her face I'd not seen in the whole winter, something the bottom of the water never touches, and she didn't say thank you, because we'd never once said it to each other, and it was too late to start, and we both knew it. She just handed the book back. And she said, quiet, the way she said her name the first time, the way you hand someone a tool they're going to need. Give me the pencil tonight. And I did. I don't know what she wrote. That was hers. A person's line is a person's own. That was always the whole point of it. Scene knew it, and I know it, and Della learned it that winter same as she learned the wood and the light and the fox. I gave her the pencil, and I turned my back the way Dawa turns his, to give the only privacy the room had, and I let her have her line. I never asked what it was. Spring's coming. The big man may come with it or send others, and I've done the arithmetic, and it's bad arithmetic, and I've stopped counting it, because some sums you can't live inside. What I know is this. There's 2 of us splitting the wood now. There's a book with more than one hand in it. And somewhere down that black trail, when the thaw comes, 3 men or 30 will find out what everyone finds out too late on this mountain, that they were never as big as they thought, and she was never as small. She had nothing left. I told her she did now. I finally know what I meant.